What makes a jazz solo sound coherent and memorable? Why do some improvisations feel like they tell a story, while others just sound like a bunch of notes? I think that one of the key elements that separate an okay player from a great player is their ability to use motivic development. Today I'm going to break down how you can practice motivic development in jazz, using a structured approach that will make your solos sound more intentional, musical, and engaging. Before we dive into the exercises, we first have to establish what a motive is. A motive is a short or simple musical idea that can be developed and transformed over time. It can be melodic or rhythmic, or in most cases, both. My old Berklee teacher and probably one of the most respected jazz educators of our time, Hal Crook, has explained motivic development as being the opposite of through-composed playing. In a through-composed approach, you are constantly playing new ideas. Motivic development, on the other hand, is taking a motive and repeating and developing it to create coherence in your improvisations. I think one of Hal's favorite words is balance, and it's so important to have a balance in your playing of motivic development and through composed ideas. If you only play through composed stuff, it's not going to sound interesting and coherent. Now, on the other hand, if you play using only motivic development, it's not going to sound balanced and it's going to sound very insisting. So a big shout out to Hal Crook for inspiring this video. He taught me so much about motivic development, and this is going to be my spin on the stuff that he and other teachers have taught me. Most of the time, a motive is both rhythmic and melodic, but for the purposes of the exercises in this video, I've decided to break it down into melodic development and rhythmic development. By separating the two and focusing on them individually first, it'll be so much easier when we get to the exercises when we combine the two. I want to begin by talking about different ways to develop a melodic motive. This means that we're not changing the rhythm, but we're changing the melody to develop the melodic content of the original motive. First up, let's talk about repetition. By repeating something that has a strong melodic idea, you can establish it as a motive. This is a great place to start because it will reel the listener in and make them understand that something is going on. Now, the first way to develop a melodic motive is by transposing it. Play the exact same melody, but transposed up or down a certain interval. Next up is sequencing the motive diatonically. Diatonic simply means something that belongs in the key center we're in. So moving the motive up or down in a certain interval, but adjusting it so that it fits over the chords. Note that we're keeping the same melodic curve and trying to keep the motive as close to the original as possible, but we're adjusting just a few of the notes so that it fits over the harmony. Fragmentation means you're taking parts of the original motive and developing those. Say the motive has two distinct parts. You can take either of these two parts and develop them individually. You could also flip them so that you're playing the first half of the motive last and the last part of the motive first. Now finally, we get into extending the motive. This means adding notes to the end of it. You should also note that you have the option to add something going into the motive. You should also note that there are some classical ways to develop a motive in classical music. These are harder to apply in jazz because they require a lot of thinking and it's not as easy to do on the spot with the motive. This includes inverting the motive, inverting all the intervals within a melodic motive, and retrograde, playing the motive backwards. So time to move on to rhythmic motives, and we start the same way as we did with a melodic motive. Repetition is the best way to establish something as a motive, and it can be done to rhythms as well. Augmentation means taking some or all of the rhythmic values in the original motive and extending them. This could mean playing the entire motive in halftime or simply extending just a couple of the notes in the motive. When we extend some of the notes in the motive, we also end up displacing the remainder of the motive, but we're going to get to displacement later. Now the opposite of augmentation is diminution. Play the motive in double time or take some of the rhythmic values and shorten them. Just like with melodic development, we can also fragment the rhythmic part of a motive. Do this in the same way as you would with the melodic motive. Take just the first half or the second half of the motive and develop the rhythm. Now finally, and perhaps the most interesting way to develop a rhythmic motive is displacement. Try starting your motive from different upbeats and downbeats of the bar and see how big an impact that can have on the rhythm of the motive. Now that we've covered all the various ways to develop a motive, let's put together some exercises that will help you get started doing all of this. The first thing we have to do is to make a motive. Make it very simple so that you will be able to do the following exercises. First up, let's start by working on developing the melodic side of your motive. Start by learning to transpose the motive through all 12 keys. You can do this throughout the circle of fifths, or you can move it up or down in certain intervals. I'm going to do my motive up in half steps. So now that you know how to transpose the motive around, let's try sequencing it diatonically. Play your motive over a standard and move it around in different intervals while adjusting it so that it fits to the harmony of the tune. Note that we're trying to keep the melodic curve of the motive intact, so aim to change as little as possible, only what is necessary to make it work over the chords. Now let's deconstruct this motive even more. Keep only the rhythm of the original motive, but change the melody freely. You can change the melodic curve of the motive, and you can change the intervals in which you move. Now let's play a couple of fragments of that motive. I'm going to take both the first half and the second half of my motive and move it around melodically. Now let's work on extending the motive. You can combine this with any of the previous exercises, and you can also add something going into the motive. Now we are ready to look at some of the ways to expand and develop the motive rhythmically. Now for these rhythmic exercises, we can simplify it so that we're only thinking about rhythm. We do this by either playing only one note or even clapping along with a metronome. Let's start by working on displacing the motive. try starting the motive from every single downbeat or upbeat of the bar.
1, 2, 3.
Now let's play the motive in halftime and in double time. You can also work on displacing those halftime and double time versions of the motive.
1, 2.
Now let's work on augmenting or diminishing only some of the rhythms in the motive. In some cases, this also means displacing the motive. So try to be creative with where you augment or diminish the motive and see how many different options you can come up with.
1, 2, 3.
Now finally, let's do some fragmentation to the rhythm of the motive. You can combine this with all the other exercises. Take those fragments and displace them. You can augment them and diminish them. And try using different fragments of the original motive.
1, 2, 3.
Now that we have worked isolated on both melodic and rhythmic development of the motive, we're finally ready to put it all together and get some real interesting motivic development. Now let's start combining the rhythmic and melodic development exercises into new exercises. The first example I will be showing you is displacing the rhythmic content of the motive while also transposing it melodically. Or you can try sequencing the motive diatonically while also extending or augmenting some or all of the rhythms. Now let's fragment the motive and play around with all the various ways we can develop those fragments. And this is really where the exercise starts. You get to become your own teacher and be creative and come up with your own exercises for motivic development. By doing it this way, you will never run out of exercises to work on motivic development. In order to become a true expert at motivic development, you have to listen to a lot of music. A good place to start is with Sonny Rollins. He is a master of developing motives, and he can play a motive for a very long time without losing interest. And also let me know in the comments what other musicians you think are great at motivic development. If you want to hear some of the ways that I use motivic development in my playing, you can check out my new album Slackline. It's linked down below. Motivic development is one of the most powerful tools in jazz improvisation. It gives your solos shape, it makes your ideas memorable, and it helps you to play with intention. By practicing these exercises, you will hear that your solos start taking form and evolving into something more structured and engaging. If you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and leave me a comment below. I love hearing from you guys about these concepts because we all have our slight differences in how we approach it, and maybe your unique approach might be valuable to someone else in the comments. So happy practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.